You know that feeling in schools? The one where it seems like, oh, everyone's scrambling.
Uh-huh.
Like there's this constant pressure to buy the newest gadgets, adopt the latest platforms, just to avoid being left behind.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Does it feel like the technology is kind of dragging us along rather than us choosing the tech that serves our goals?
That feeling you describe, it's incredibly common in education right now.
Yeah.
And it raises a fundamental question, really.
Which is?
Are we strategically selecting and using technology to enhance learning, or are we maybe just reacting to the sheer pace of technological change?
Exactly. And that question is pretty much what this deep dive is all about.
Okay.
We're going behind the scenes, sort of looking into the minds of the people on the front lines of these decisions in K-12 schools. The technology directors, the instructional technology specialists.
The ones making the calls.
Right. What are their core beliefs about technology? Their philosophies, maybe? And how do those beliefs actually, influence the tech landscape that shows up in classrooms?
Well, to explore this, we're diving into a really fascinating study. It's by Mark David Webster.
Okay.
We got two pieces of his work here. A 2016 article that describes his research approach, how he did it, and then a 2017 article laying out what he actually found.
And what's cool about this study, or what I found interesting anyway, is the way he did it. He used a method called grounded theory.
Ah, grounded theory, right?
Yeah, so forget starting with some preset hypothesis you're trying to prove, right? Grounded theory is more about going out, talking to people, gathering data directly from their experiences, and letting a theory sort of emerge, letting it build from that data itself.
Yeah, it's about listening to what people tell you, and then identifying the key concepts, the relationships that explain what's really going on in their world. It comes from the ground up, so to speak.
Exactly. So our mission today is to unpack the most significant philosophical views these K-12 tech leaders hold.
Okay.
We're going to see how those beliefs directly impact their real-world decisions, uncover some maybe surprising tensions in their thinking.
Tensions are always interesting.
Right. And ultimately reveal a core challenge, one that might sound incredibly familiar to, well, anyone working with technology in schools today.
Sounds good. Where do we start?
So let's start with why this study even happened. What prompted Mark David Webster to look into this in the first place?
Well, the source tells us his interest grew directly out of his own experience. He actually worked in educational technology leadership himself.
Ah, okay. So he lived it.
He did. He felt that pressure you mentioned right at the top.
Right.
Wrestling with the relentless pace of change and the challenge of making thoughtful technology decisions in that kind of environment.
So his personal struggle kind of sparked the research question. Makes sense.
Precisely. And he noticed a gap. He saw that while people talked theoretically about philosophical ideas related to technology, things like technological determinism.
Right, those big concepts.
Yeah, there wasn't much research actually asking the people in K-12 tech leadership roles, hey, what do you think? And how does it influence your day-to-day practice?
So he wanted to bridge that gap, the gap between the theory and the practice, by talking to the people actually doing the job.
Exactly.
So what specifically was he trying to figure out? What were the research questions?
He set out to do basically three things. First, identify the philosophical assumptions K-12 tech leaders have about technology. What are their underlying beliefs?
Okay.
Second, investigate how those assumptions influence the decisions they make about technology. The practical side.
Makes sense. And third?
And third, specifically look for whether assumptions aligned with technological determinism, that idea that tech drives society were present. Was that thinking actually there?
Gotcha. So beliefs, impact on decisions, and the determinism angle. How did he go about gathering this information from them? What were the methods?
Well, since he was using grounded theory, building theory from people's experiences, his main approach was to talk to them directly.
Right. Makes sense.
He interviewed 31 participants from different school districts in Virginia. It was a mix of technology directors and instructional technology specialists.
Okay, 31 people.
Yeah, and he also had them fill out a written questionnaire. It had open-ended questions so they could elaborate.
So getting their thoughts through conversations and writing, kind of triangulating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He wanted to hear their perspectives in their own words. He used these interviews and questionnaires to gather these really rich descriptions of their beliefs and their decision-making processes.
And then what? He just had piles of interview notes.
Well, then the analysis starts. He analyzed all that data using grounded theory methods, comparing what different people said, looking for common ideas, patterns, relationships. basically trying to build an explanation for how they thought about technology and made choices based on what they told him.
Okay, so he collected all this detailed input and then looked for the big themes that emerged. That gives us a good sense of how he approached it.
Yeah, it was a rigorous process.
So what were the most common beliefs, the philosophies about technology that he found these school leaders held? What did they actually think?
All right, let's dive into the first set of key findings. RQ1, if you like. Based on his conversations, he found a few core views were, well, very common among these tech leaders.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first one sounds pretty straightforward, actually. Many leaders viewed technology as a tool. This was a really prevalent perspective.
Like a hammer or a screwdriver, something you use to get a job done.
Precisely that. They saw technology as a means to an end, something people use for a specific purpose. One director put it quite clearly, saying, "I look at technology as a tool to get the job done, not as an entity by itself."
Not an end in itself.
Right. They describe technology in terms of its function. An instructional tool, a productivity tool, a way to communicate, a resource for information. It was defined by its use by people.
Okay, so the tool view is strong, widely held. What else did he find? Any other big beliefs?
Yeah, another common view was what he termed technological optimism. These leaders were, generally speaking, quite positive about technology's potential.
Optimism, like a belief that tech is inherently good or can solve problems, that sort of thing?
Yes, exactly. That kind of hopeful perspective. There's a quote from one director that really captures it. "A favorite saying of mine is that whatever the ill might be, technology will save the world."
Wow, that's quite optimistic.
It is. And this also showed up as actively advocating for technology, trying to get others on board, encouraging colleagues. An instructional technology specialist shared, "I try to stay optimistic and attempt to be proactive in encouraging my colleagues to use technologies."
Okay, so tech as a tool and a generally positive, optimistic outlook on it. What's the third common belief he found?
This one gets closer to that feeling we started with. It's the idea that technological change is inevitable. Almost everyone in the study, it seems, felt this way. They saw technology as this kind of unstoppable force, something that just keeps moving forward, whether you like it or not.
Like a wave you can't really stand in front of, you just have to ride it.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. One director's philosophy was very plain-spoken. Technological change is inevitable, and we should not resist it. We've gone through more change because of technology than anything else in the last 150 years. Strong statement. Yeah. And this perspective included feeling like you just have to embrace change, or seeing specific trends like BYOD, bring your own device, or moving to digital books as simply destined to happen. It's coming. Get ready.
Okay, so tech is a tool, people are optimistic about it, and its change feels inevitable. Those seem like they might shape decisions in different, maybe even conflicting ways. Was there anything else that stood out about their core beliefs?
Yes, and this was actually a point of real insight in the study, something quite interesting.
Wow.
While many held that tool view, which often implies neutrality, right? A tool is just a tool.
Right. A hammer isn't good or bad. It depends how you use it.
Exactly. But a significant majority of participants, 22 out of 31, also believed that technology raises questions of human values. It's value-laden.
Wait, hold on. That sounds like a potential tension, doesn't it? How can something just be a neutral tool, like a hammer, but also inherently raise questions about values?
That's the fascinating bit. That's the cognitive dissonance the study points towards. It found that even though they saw technology functionally as a tool, they simultaneously recognized that its use isn't neutral in practice.
The use isn't neutral.
Right. Its use has ethical consequences. It can promote or challenge certain values. One director noted, "Nowadays, there's a greater need to understand the ethical implications of using technology."
Okay, so what kind of value questions or ethical concerns were on their minds? What were they thinking about?
Well, the most frequent concern mentioned was internet safety for students. That came up a lot.
Understandable.
Definitely. But they also brought up other important issues like personal privacy, ensuring everyone has fair access to technology, the equity piece.
Yeah, that's huge.
It is. And also copyright, and even the environmental sustainability, the impact of all these devices. So they see technology as a tool, and they are grappling with the complex human and ethical dimensions that come with using it. It's not simple.
Okay, so they've got these underlying beliefs. Tech is a tool, change is inevitable, generally optimistic about it, and importantly, it raises these complex values questions. Now, the next step. How do these beliefs actually translate into the practical decisions they make? about what technology to buy, implement, and support in schools.
Right. That brings us to the second big research question and its findings.
Yeah.
How these philosophies influence decision-making in practice. The study found two main approaches guiding their choices, and these approaches really reveal that core tension you highlighted right at the start.
Okay, two main approaches, and I'm guessing one approach seems to align pretty closely with that idea of tech as a tool.
Absolutely. One very clear approach was the belief that educational goals and curriculum should drive technology.
Okay, start with the learning.
Exactly. This means decisions about technology should start with what students need to learn and how they learn best. Technology comes after you've defined the educational need as a way to help meet that need.
So it serves the goal.
Precisely. It aligns perfectly with the instrumental tool-based view we talked about.
Figure out the learning objective first. Then look for tech that fits. That makes intuitive sense.
That's the principle. As one director said, quite pointedly, there are no such things as technology initiatives. There are business of education projects designed to meet goals and objectives of student achievement through the use of technology. Strong stance.
Very. Another felt strongly that the driving force should be the educational needs. Otherwise, technology is being implemented, and then everyone has to figure out how to make it work.
Right, the cart before the horse problem.
Exactly. And this is essentially the standard, the textbook, best practice for tech integration. It's about being intentional, being strategic, and not just getting tech for the sake of having it.
That sounds like the ideal scenario, the way it should work. What's the other approach that emerged? The one that creates the tension. This is where it gets really interesting because this second approach was identified as the core category, the most significant phenomenon in the entire study. It was felt by all 31 participants.
Wow, every single one.
Every single participant. And this core approach is driven by the sense that they must keep up with technology or be left behind.
Ah, there it is. That pressure again.
That's the one. It was the most powerful factor explaining their decisions, according to the study. And it stems directly from that belief we discussed earlier that technological change is inevitable and rapid. That belief creates this strong sense of urgency, this imperative to keep pace.
So it's less about the educational goals driving the tech choices and more about the sheer speed of the tech driving their decisions. Is that fair?
That's the dynamic the study points to. One participant articulated the feeling very clearly. Technology is always changing, and you must change with it or you will be left behind.
Ooh.
Yeah. And another echoed the sentiment. As fast as technology changes, in education we should keep up with it or be one step ahead.
Yeah.
You could feel the pressure in that.
That just sounds exhausting, honestly.
It is. And the study really highlighted the push and pull they feel. On one side is that intense external pressure to keep up Betty, which is especially hard, with limited school resources. Budgets aren't infinite.
Right.
As one specialist shared, you have to always keep up with it. If you let any time go by, you'll get behind and be lost. That sense of urgency.
And what's pulling the other way? What's the counterforce?
The other side is the internal resistance they often face within the school system itself. People, processes, inertia. As one director observed, education tends to be very, very resistant to change, and that holds us back.
Wow. So they're caught between this external force pushing for rapid change and sometimes internal forces, digging their heels in.
Exactly. It's a classic change management dilemma,
Yeah.
amplified by the speed of tech, caught in the middle.
That really makes the challenge concrete trying to lead change when you feel that intense pressure externally, but also encounter resistance internally. It's a tough spot.
It really is. Now, alongside these two main approaches, goals should drive versus keep up or be left behind. The study also confirmed that the value-laden perspective we discussed does influence decisions too.
Okay, so the ethics part isn't forgotten.
No, not at all. A large majority of participants, 29 of 31, consciously considered ethical factors when making choices about technology implementation. They were thinking about student safety, privacy, equitable access, acceptable use policies, all those things.
So they are trying to balance it all. The educational purpose, the intense pressure to keep up, and the crucial ethical implications. That's a lot to juggle.
It absolutely is.
Let's zoom in a bit more on that idea of inevitability and keeping up. How does that connect back to technological determinism? Because the study specifically set out to explore that, right?
Right. That was our key three. And the study found that the prevalent view among leaders that technological change is inevitable isn't just an observation. It's interpreted as a manifestation of something called the technological imperative.
The imperative. That sounds like a command, like you have to do it.
It does, doesn't it? And it kind of feels that way to them based on the data. It's the idea which is linked to technological determinism, that technology has this powerful controlling influence, and because it's seen as unstoppable, it creates a requirement or an imperative for us, for schools, to keep pace with it. One specialist described it this way: technology is imperative for today's schools. It's an unstoppable force, and it has to be used and harnessed properly. You hear the forcefulness there.
So the thinking isn't just tech is changing, it's more like tech is changing rapidly, it's unstoppable, and therefore we must adopt it to keep up.
Precisely. The study suggests this imperative creates a kind of mindset, maybe an ideological orientation, or a discourse of inevitability within K-12 tech culture.
A discourse of inevitability, like how people talk about it.
Yeah. You hear it when people talk about certain trends, like the inevitable rise of BYOD or the move to ebooks, as if they are simply things that will happen, regardless of specific educational planning or maybe even desire. It's just the way things are going.
That makes sense. The language itself kind of reinforces the feeling that these changes are outside their control or predetermined.
Yes, exactly. However, and this is a really important nuance the study highlights, while this sounds very deterministic, like technology is completely in the driver's seat philosophically.
Right.
The study found the leader's motivation for feeling this imperative wasn't necessarily just an abstract belief in technology's inherent power. Their primary concern, the reason they felt they had to keep up, was deeply rooted in their desire to help prepare students for a future that will clearly be filled with technology.
Okay. So the pressure they feel isn't necessarily about serving the technology itself, like bowing down to the machine.
Right, not quite like that.
But it's about serving the students by ensuring they are equipped for the world they'll eventually enter.
That's the interpretation drawn from the data, yes.
Yeah.
It's a concern for student readiness, for their future prospects, that fuels that feeling of necessity, that imperative to keep pace with technological change.
Okay, that adds a crucial layer. It's still deterministic in a way, but the motivation is student-focused. So this all brings us to the central conclusion, doesn't it? The theory that kind of ties everything together. What did the study identify as the core dynamic influencing these leaders?
Exactly. The study synthesized these findings into what the researcher calls the weighted priority.
The weighted priority. Okay.
It's a term meant to explain that central tension we've been discussing all along.
Yeah.
On one hand, leaders often believe, ideally, that educational goals should drive technology decisions. That's the instrumental view, the best practice.
Yeah, ideal, yeah.
But on the other hand, they also strongly perceive technological change as inevitable. And that perception creates that powerful pressure, that technological imperative to keep up.
So you have the principal goals should lead, and then you have the reality of this immense pressure coming from the outside world, from the pace of change itself.
Yeah. Precisely. And the key conclusion, the core of the weighted priority theory, is this. While leaders believe goals should drive technology, the perceived inevitability of change and the intense pressure to keep up mean that in practice, the need to keep up with technology, or be left behind, is often given the greater weight. It gets prioritized when difficult decisions have to be made, when resources are tight, when time is short.
The weighted priority, that's a really powerful way to put it. It captures that feeling of being pulled between the ideal and the practical reality. The pressure outweighs the principle sometimes.
It seems to. And the consequence of this, as the leaders themselves observed in the study highlights, is that this weighted priority can lead to adopting technology almost for the sake of technology.
Right, buying the shiny new thing.
Yeah, without maybe fully ensuring it's truly integrated and aligned with clear educational goals first. One specialist observation really captured this well. It seems like in the ever-evolving technology world, folks are fast to jump on the bandwagon for the latest and greatest gadget or piece of software without first considering its instructional impact.
So they end up reacting to that overwhelming pressure to stay current, and sometimes that reaction bypasses or maybe short circuits the crucial step of asking, okay, but how does this actually help students learn better?
Right, that crucial connection gets weaker. And the leaders themselves saw the negative outcomes of this, technology adopted without a clear educational plan, often led to teachers resisting it, schools scrambling after the fact to figure out how to use it effectively.
Playing catch-up internally.
Exactly. And sometimes the initiatives just didn't deliver. They failed to make a real difference for learning. So this weighted priority isn't just a theoretical idea. It has real, tangible impacts and consequences in schools.
It also sounds like those other external factors we mentioned, like tight budgets and just the sheer speed of innovation, maybe outpacing thoughtful research and planning, just add fuel to that fire. They intensify that pressure to prioritize keeping up.
Absolutely. The source notes those challenges explicitly. There's this feeling, as one participant put it, that the game has changed and research cannot keep up, and I don't want my students left behind.
Yeah, that quote really hits home.
It does. It underscores that the pressure is very real, and these leaders are trying to navigate it while feeling this immense responsibility for their students' future readiness.
Okay, so taking a step back from the details, what's the big picture? What's the main takeaway from this deep dive into the perspectives of K-12 tech leaders?
Well, I think the core takeaway is really clear. The philosophical assumptions tech leaders hold about technology are not just, abstract ideas. They're not just academic. They significantly shape their actual decision-making.
They matter in the real world.
Yeah. They really matter. And the study reveals this fundamental tension, this sort of tug of war between the ideal they strive for, which is technology serving clear educational goals, and the powerful practical reality of that perceived imperative to keep pace with rapid technological change, the weighted priority.
Yeah, it reflects that feeling we started with, doesn't it? That dynamic struggle between being strategic and intentional versus being reactive for fear of being left behind. It shows that this isn't just random chaos. There are underlying beliefs and very real pressures driving these decisions.
Exactly. It highlights that while they genuinely believe goals should drive technology, the sheer weight of that keying up pressure often pushes them, perhaps unintentionally, towards a more reactive approach in practice.
Which leaves us, and maybe you listening, with a really important, maybe provocative question to consider, doesn't it?
I think so.
If the decisions about technology in our schools are often primarily driven by that pressure to keep up, rather than being maybe as firmly rooted as they should be in educational goals and instructional impact, what does that mean? What are the long-term implications for the effectiveness, the purpose, and maybe even the equity of technology use in schools down the road?
And following on that, how can educational leaders, knowing this tension exists, better navigate it? How can they balance the very real imperative they feel to keep pace with innovation while also ensuring that technology truly serves the deeper mission of teaching and learning and not the other way around?
Yeah. How do you keep the horse in front of the cart when the cart feels like it's moving at lightning speed? Something to definitely think about.